record. Awesome. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Melissa C. I'm a recovered compulsive overeater. I'm coming to you from the Hudson Valley, New York. Welcome to those that are new here. We're really happy that you found your way here. As a group of us, we just love to come together and try to help one another as best we can. So tonight we're going to jump into step 4. And we're going to kind of go back and forth between the AA 12 and 12 and a little bit in the big book as well. I'm a big lover of the AA 12 and 12. I think it has a lot of really good information for us, breaks things down. And so you can get your books out, we can get down to it. So step 4 says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And page 42 in the AA 12 and 12 says this: creation gave us instincts for a purpose. Without them, we wouldn't be complete human beings. But further down the page, we're told more about these instincts, that they often far exceed their proper functions. Powerfully, blindly, and many times subtly, they drive us, dominate us, and insist upon ruling our lives. And then it says, nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct. When that happens, our great natural assets, the instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. So for me, I define, when we talk about what the spiritual malady is, for me, it means that my instincts, those very things that God gave me to keep me alive, have become sources of pain. When I am living in the spiritual malady, in the realm of spiritual malady, my instincts hurt me. They don't help me. And the things that are great natural assets, my human instincts, and there's 3 basic human instincts. One is self-preservation, right? Things that keep our bodies alive. So I have instincts that keep me alive. Things like hunger, thirst, safety from immediate danger. Those are my instincts. And 2, I have a sexual instinct, right? That's the thing that keeps our species alive. 1 keeps me alive, 1 keeps our species alive. And then 3, the social instinct. And that's the drive we have to get along with other people, which, by the way, impacts our ability to keep ourselves alive, right? We need others in order to function. And also sexually, right? We need others in order to keep those instincts intact. So those very things have been misdirected. That's what it says. They've been misdirected. And who's directing them when they're misdirected? Me, right? It's like remember, step 4 comes at the heels of step 3, where we find out that being the director is not good for us, right? So if I'm the director, then my instincts go from helpful to harmful. And when I'm the director, my instincts, I would say they're like instincts on steroids. They're like way overblown. They become sources of embarrassment and pain. And so, it led me to think. I had a conversation with someone recently who was in a situation and they felt fear about it. And I know for myself, my fear, right, is part of, we're supposed to be afraid of certain things because that keeps us alive. But it's when that is unreasonable. When I experience my boss's possible disapproval or someone not liking me as though it's threatening my life, as though my very life is in danger, with that same kind of elevated panic, that's instincts on steroids. That is no longer serving. And what happens is my instincts become true sources of embarrassment and pain. And, step 4 says this: even just the fact that we're enslaved by our hunger and thirst, right? I mean, think about it. If my hunger and my thirst are enslaving, you know, it's clear that my human instincts have been perverted and polluted because hunger and thirst are part of how a species stays alive. And those instincts, also to get along with others and be able to function as human social creatures has turned some of us, me, right, into managers and controllers, and others into people pleasers, right? We either are going to control everybody around us or we're going to manipulate them, still controlling them by pleasing others, right? And so those are social instincts that have gone wrong. Step 4 is a vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are. And we're looking at the how, when, and where. That's what it says in the AA 12 and 12. And what I find most important from that sentence is that we're looking at the how, when, and where, but we're not looking at the why, right? We're not looking at the why I have this liability, why I am the way I am. Why is a question that we also, we often ask when we're looking to assign blame, when we're looking to not really take responsibility. And for the purposes of our 12-step work, the why is unimportant. It might be important in psychology, it might be important on the analyst's couch to understand the why, but the spiritual work that we do through the steps is not therapy. It's a different model entirely. So the why is unimportant. And when I waste too much energy on why, what I'm really saying is I'm not the one who's at fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. I'm a victim. And I don't need to change, right? That's the leap I go. I go from I'm the victim. It's not my fault. I don't need to change. I want others to do the changing, and I want my circumstances to change. And step 4 is not an inventory of others. It's not an inventory of my circumstances. It's a moral inventory. And I think about it like this: if my recovery is going to be contingent upon other people changing, I am in serious bondage. I just went from being enslaved by the food to now being enslaved by the actions of other people. We are promised freedom, right? Freedom from all things. So now let's look at these instincts, and we're going to specifically focus on the how, the where, and the when our instincts became liabilities. And we will make a concerned effort to leave the why aside completely. Like we're going to just put the why over here. All right, how do my instincts cause me problems? Well, because I impose them onto others. Page 44 says this: every time a person imposes his instincts unreasonably upon others, unhappiness follows. When an individual's desire for prestige becomes uncontrollable, whether in the sewing circle or the international conference table, other people suffer and often revolt. And this collision of instincts can produce anything from a cold snub to a blazing revolution. In these ways, we are set in conflict, not only with ourselves, but with other people who have instincts too, right? So we collide into others who also have instincts. And so, for me, I'll give my example is that my instincts for security, right? Natural, healthy instinct to feel secure, to feel safe, had me chasing prestige, had me like running after, opportunities to feel powerful, to feel important. I wanted attention, I wanted achievement, I wanted success and praise, and I wanted it everywhere. I wanted it everywhere that I went, I needed to have it. So whether it was with my siblings, in my workplace, way back when, it was like when I was the Girl Scout leader, right? I needed prestige everywhere that I put my feet. I wanted to reign, when my kids were little, I'd say, like, I look back at my behavior. I wanted to reign as the queen of the kick ass children's birthday parties. Like, that was so important to me. I wanted to be, I wanted people to say, oh my God, how did you do that? That's amazing. You have the best ideas. How did you do all that? Right. And, I wanted to be the best teacher in my building. Not that I was necessarily instructing the students better, but that I was doing things visibly so that others would give me accolades and strokes, right? So that I would put on elaborate performances with my class, like with like costumes and all sorts of things. There's nothing wrong with that if your motives are good. But my motives were not good. My motives were so that I could get attention, so that I would feel okay. I'd say, like, I wanted a trophy for folding the laundry in my house. I wanted, like, if I folded the laundry, I wanted I wanted my husband to be like, oh my God, you're the best wife ever. You know, um, and why is this a problem? Like, what's wrong with that, right? Isn't it good to be a success, right? Isn't it good, to do those things? Is that what God would want, right? I could say, yeah, God wants me to be a good mom and a good teacher and a good what, right? But not when it's for all the wrong reasons, and not when it collides with others. And so here's an example, right? If I wanted to have supreme status amongst my siblings, what it would look like is I would put one of them down to build myself up, right? In conversation with one, I would look for every opportunity to say how I was better, to say how something about me was superior. Um, you know, I Back in the day, I used to serve on committees all the time in my workplace. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But all the committees I served on had to have really good titles. They had to have prestigious sounding titles. They had to come with like fringe benefits. And most of the time, they took me out of my classroom, right? So I wasn't necessarily gaining anything or bringing anything back in service. And I mean, another thing that would often happen when I would be like annoying my colleagues, I'd be really pissing them off because I'd be unable to listen to their ideas. It was only my ideas, and it was like I couldn't hear their ideas. And especially if an idea was brought forward publicly, my heart would almost be pounding because I better think of something just as good as what they just shared or better. Right. And that's my instincts gone awry. That's my instincts on steroids. And I have a friend years ago who shared with me that her instinct for for having her financial needs met had her rummaging through her boss's files. And she said she was like a hungry bear rummaging through the garbage, like with that same kind of like panicked energy looking through her boss's files. And okay, so that's a problem. That's our instincts way out of proportion. And so it says here, if examining our part doesn't sound like much fun, no worries, right? Page 44 says this perverse soul sickness is not pleasant to look upon. It's not fun to like bring this out and share these things. Um, but instincts on rampage balk at investigation. Like, we don't want to be investigating it and really looking at my soul sickness. It's not enjoyable. And there are some problems that some of us have. Um, One, swamped with guilt and self loathing, right? We wallow in this messy bog. So, one of the things that I've been taught, and I think it's really important, is that we move intensively but swiftly through the fourth step. We don't leave things out, but we don't hang out in it too long because if it's a swamp, right? If it's a messy bog, that's a swamp. If I hang out too long in that swamp, my guilt overwhelms me to the point where the food seems like the only thing that I can do. It's like I just, that guilt years ago would make me want to eat. I would feel unworthy, right? That feeling of unworthiness. I'm so horrible. I'm sitting in this for ages, not getting to the other side. And this is pride in reverse. When I feel like I'm the worst possible human, right? That's still prideful, but it's pride in reverse. And guilty people might not think much of themselves. However, they think about themselves all the time. And that's a danger for me, right? If I'm sitting around feeling guilty, I am thinking about me over and over and over. Even if my thoughts about me aren't pleasant, my mind is still fixated on me. Number two, if, however, our natural disposition is inclined to self righteousness or grandiosity, our reaction be just the opposite. We will be offended at a suggested inventory. So here it's clear that our problem that we think too much of ourselves. One, we think of ourselves too much, and here we think too much of ourselves. We think our only problem is our eating. Right? People say, "Oh, when I was in the food, I like." We blame all our ugly behaviors on the substance, as though the substance causes all our ugly behaviors. And we often hear people say how badly they behaved when they're in the food. But the truth is that the food does not cause the defects. And so they don't disappear just when we stop eating. Otherwise, our whole 12-step program would be go on a diet, everything's better, right? And that's not the case. In fact, our defective ways is what drives us to eat. So the food, it says, is the symptom. The actual sickness that we have is the soul sickness, right? Which is why some people have this experience in, that they put the food down, or many people would put the drink down and they pick something else up. Because if we don't get to the root causes, if we don't get to the soul sickness, we're going to use another symptom. We're going to rely on another thing. Number three, another obstacle is the false belief that our problems are other people. So, our present anxieties and troubles we cry are caused by the behavior of other people. People who really need a moral inventory. Like we'd be like, oh, they need a moral inventory. We firmly believe that if only they treat us better, we'd be all right. And therefore, we think our indignation is justified and reasonable. And the AA 12 and 12 stresses the importance of a sponsor when we do our inventories for just that very reason. Because a sponsor will be able to guide us back on track when we are busy pointing the finger at others. In fact, we know from the big book that a self appraisal is insufficient. We're told a solitary self appraisal is insufficient. We need others. In page 46, it says this: at this stage of the inventory, preceding our sponsors come to the rescue. So here our sponsors come in, and they can do this, for they are the carriers of the AA tested experience with step 4. They can comfort the melancholy. So if you're feeling really sad about things you've done, by first showing him that his case is not strange or different, than his character defects are probably no more numerous or worse than those of anyone else in AA. It's like, settle down. You're not the worst person in the world, right? Plenty of us here. My own sponsor, for me, just lovingly listened to me tell her some of the awful, shameful things I did. I tell her all the awful things I did, and I was racked with guilt. And I just remember I thought she was going to be shocked. I was like waiting for her eyes to go, oh, and it never happened. It was like, yeah, yeah, didn't, she wasn't shocked by my confessions. And I think we're given instructions as sponsors as well how to be helpful here. We do not judge. We are not the judges, right? We listen and we guide and we reassure them by telling them about our own ugly past. We're supposed to share our experience with others. We demonstrate humility, right? And the sponsor talks freely and easily and without exhibitionism about his own defects, past and present. So I think it's important our sponsors don't make themselves out to be supreme human beings. We're human. And I think it's good that it says, you know, that the defects past and present. Like, I think it's good when a sponsor says to a sponsor, yeah, I find myself in that same situation from time to time. Here's what I do. Or I've had a similar problem. And I think that's a very effective way of going through an inventory with someone that you can share a relatively, recent experience to sort of show them how this works, that this continues to work for a lifetime. The sponsor can also point out the assets of the newcomer because it's an inventory. It's not just a list of all the crap about you. It's your assets as well. And what this does is it gives the sponsee objectivity and it allows them to trust. It allows them to feel a sense of trust for the person. And remember, that we are the products of God's creation. And so there must be things about us that are beautiful and good, even in the worst of us. We're not just great big piles of garbage, right? And so, how does the sponsor help someone who doesn't think they have any defects at all, right? They don't need any comfort. In fact, they need help to discover a chink in the wall their ego has built, through which the light of reason can shine. These are people that think they're perfect. They're like, I didn't do anything. I got no resentment. The rest of the people in the world just suck. I'm okay. I'm really okay. I've got no problem here. And here's where we need to carefully find their area of work. We are supposed to poke around till we find that little sore spot in them. They need to be taken down a notch, right? Um, they need humility, but it's got to be an inside job where they discover their own vulnerability. And so it's done light-handedly, you know. And I would point out to them, well, if you're so perfect, why are you eating yourself to death? If you got no problem, what are you doing here? Why hasn't Weight Watchers worked? Is it really just an allergy of the body? Then don't eat this food. You should be okay. But clearly, there's got to be something, there's got to be some underlying cause why you're turning to the food again and again, right? And if their only problems were the problems that food caused them, then why haven't all the diets and schemes worked? And these people are helped again the way the first types were helped, right? By a sponsor who shares their own experiences in thinking their only problem was the substance, and I would share with the sponsee how I put the food down for years, thinking I really didn't need to do much else. I just, put the food down until I couldn't, until, I found myself against my own knowledge and judgment eating the things that I knew were problematic. And so clearly there was something more underneath there. And that's what I would point out to somebody. Page 47 says this: we thought conditions drove us to drink. And when we tried to correct these conditions and found that we couldn't to our entire satisfaction, our drinking went out of hand and we became alcoholics. It never occurred to us that we needed to change ourselves to meet conditions, whatever they were. So we're not in the business of changing the conditions. We're here to change our response to the condition, right? How we react to the condition. So step 4 is the actions we start taking to change ourselves to meet the conditions. And if I depended on conditions to be favorable for my sobriety, for my sanity, I would still be waiting. I'd still be sitting here waiting because life, my friends, is lifey. And there is always something coming down the pike that is part of the human experience. And if only my problems were that other people behaved poorly, if that were really my problem, if I said to you, see, my problem is the way that other people behave, I am in some serious trouble because I have no control over other people. I have no ability to change other people, and other people will not be changing. Like that, I'd say to people early on, sponsees early on, when they come in and they're full of all the family members, usually family members, that are driving them crazy. I lovingly point out, oh, yeah, they're not going to change. They are who they are. It's you that are going to have to do the changing. Your response to them is going to have to change. Um, and really, if other people are in control of me, then I can never live free. And that is not what we're here. We're here to have freedom. Putting down the food does not make life miraculously better, but working the steps makes me miraculously better at living. Right? That's what it is. So something had to be done about our vengeful resentments. It says self pity and unwarranted pride. We had to see that when we harbored grudges and planned revenge for such defeats, we were really beating ourselves with the club of anger we had intended to use on others. And, in the big book, it says this, page 66 says, a parent, it's the first thing as a parent that this world and its people were often quite wrong. Okay, so if we're here to convince one another that the people in our lives are wrong, yep, check, they often are. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. That's what my first inventories looked like. It was like a complaint list of all the things people did that were wrong. And the usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. We stayed annoyed. And sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short lived. And then it goes on to say this, it's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappy. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. So we're wasting our lives on moments that would have been worthwhile. But that's bad enough. But with the alcoholic, it's not just wasting our lives. Our hope is in the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. This business of resentment is infinitely grave. It will kill us. We found that it is fatal, deadly, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we have to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. So that is a phrase I turn to a lot when I feel myself getting angry over something. Because I have to remember that as an ex-problem eater, I have a very unique set of directions. It's different from the directions that normal people live. I cannot defend and support my side and my position. In fact, I have to actually divorce myself from that kind of thinking. I remember thinking that getting recovery years ago, I thought it meant that I was going to get my voice. I was going to finally be able to stand up for myself, tell other people exactly what they ought to be doing, put the rest of the world in their place, defend my perspective, and not get pushed around anymore. Like that was the lie I told myself, that people are pushing me around and I'm going to let them know. And that is not it. That is like, I was way off the beam. Because today, what I find out is that I have to seek peace and love at all costs. That it's actually the stronger person who makes the conscious decision to not fight over that, to say, yeah, you know what? It's not my way, but I'm going to let go of having a way here. It's not that important. If my life is at risk, when I put it down to one, my life is in danger, right? Or I'm going to get my way, becomes pretty clear. Whatever that thing is usually not as important as I think it was. And I always love that, it's not programming, but it was said, like, ask yourself, is this really going to matter in a year from now? Is it going to matter in a week from now? Will it matter in 10 years from now? If the answer is no, it's not worth my life. It's worth letting it go. And so keeping grudges safe and planning revenge, like it talked about, even that awful notion of karma, it might sound spiritual. Karma is not spiritual. Karma is not up to me. Karma has a different meaning, not the way that the way I used to use that word was they'll get theirs. That's not what karma means. Um, and so I also heard that anger is the poison I drink and I expect the other person to die, right? Or anger is the poison that corrodes the vessel that contains it. So the thing that holds onto the anger is the thing that's being destroyed. Um, and sometimes I'm 100% right. Like if I look and say, am I right? Am I wrong? My inventory is about determining right versus wrong. If I am right and I'm 100% certain I'm right, I think that I'm the one who doesn't need to do an inventory. And here's something that I've encountered when doing my own inventory and when helping others by listening to their inventories, blaming others, and having a mini novel of what they did to me. This notion of venting actually brings oxygen to the smoldering fire, right? When I say, I'm going to vent about this, I'm going to talk about it. I always thought that the first step in letting go of resentments would be to first really examine the problem. Let me examine this problem closely. But this is wrong. Page 47 says this. The AA 12 and 12 tells me that we learned that if we were seriously disturbed, the first need was to quiet the disturbance, not examine it, quiet it, regardless of who or what we thought caused it. It's not to look at it closely. It's to ask God to quiet it, take it down a notch. And I think about it like this, I actually went to the foot doctor today. I was having a problem with my foot. And the first line of, that they do for anything is to try to minimize the sting, the pain, before necessarily getting at what it is. We want to sort of take away the sting, the pain from something, and so that's really what this is about, right? And who can minimize the pain in my inventory? How do we quiet disturbances? Well, it's not by venting, but it's by prayer, because only God can quiet my disturbance. I can't use self-discipline to tell me, stop feeling upset. I don't have that power. I can divorce myself from examining it closely or talking about it endlessly. I can make a conscious decision that says, I will not talk about it. But the only power that can actually remove the sting and the pain is God, right? And we ask God to help us. And further down, we're told that we have to drop blame from our speech. We have to drop the words blame from our speech and from our thoughts. And I know that this is hard. Dropping blame is really hard. It takes willingness to divorce ourselves from that line of thinking. It takes an abundance of willingness. So, I share a lot about like different things that disturb me. And, whether it's like at one time, it's funny because in my notes here, it was all about my school district. Thank you, God, that disturbance is gone. Same crazy district. I work in the same equally crazy. In fact, probably the people I work with are even more disturbed by it. But God has sort of removed my disturbance. And really, what I found out is through prayer, when I ask God to direct my thinking and to remove the sting, God gives me beautiful directions so that I actually can feel peaceful about it. And one of the things that I've learned is that when I seek God's will, God gives me directions. He tells me what to do. And even if it's hard and even if it seems unjust and unfair, I've actually found that my happiness is not contingent on easy, nor is it contingent upon fairness. My true happiness comes when I live in agreement with God's will for me. It's like, I don't know why. It still amazes me that that really is the secret. That really is like people want to know, like, how do you get happy in the midst of a hard time? Surrender it to God. Do what you believe God wants you to do right in this very moment, even when it's hard. And for me, that's like the way that many of my resentments have been resolved. I need a sponsor to help guide me. What is my part? What can I do? What are my actions here? And I've got, loads of prayers for people. I've got a prayer for difficult people. Here's my prayer for difficult people. I say, today I long for peace. I seek God, your guidance with difficult people and situations. I ask for strength to avoid the temptation of repeatedly rehashing my troubles in my head. I ask God, help me with that. My loving creator, I may need to call upon you all throughout the day to keep me from these thoughts, but I know that it is better to spend the time seeking you than to dwell on the negative, right? And that's like one of my prayers when I'm riddled with something that I can't seem to let go of. Someone says it's like a dog with a bone. Like, I need God's help to help me put the bone down, stop chewing it. Bottom of page 49 says this. Once we have complete willingness to take inventory and exert ourselves to do the job thoroughly, a wonderful light falls upon this foggy scene. As we persist, a brand new kind of confidence is born, and the sense of relief at finally facing ourselves is indescribable. These are the first fruits of step 4. So we begin to feel uplifted from just the thought of exerting ourselves and seeing ourselves honestly. Like, I think that's pretty incredible. Like, some people say, oh my gosh, oh, I don't want to do this 4th step. It's going to be like horrible, torturous. I'm afraid. And yet it says here, no, we can actually get relief at just thinking about exerting ourselves in this direction. And by now, the newcomer has probably arrived at the following conclusion that his character defects representing instincts gone astray have been the primary cause of his drinking and his eating and his failure at life. And so the next question he asks then, how am I going to take inventory of myself? And again, the text makes it clear that the drinking or eating did not cause the defects. The defects caused the drinking. The defects caused the eating. So food plan and abstinence will not cure us. And we're also getting acquainted with the understanding that this inventorying process will be a lifetime practice. So it's best to start with the ones that it says are acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. Get to the big glaring ones, right? Get to the gaping open wound first, right? Treat that first. The book begins to list questions we might ask ourselves. And rather than go through all the questions now, I want to point out a few things about step 4. And there's more than one way we do it, right? You will find a wealth of resources, of ways that different people choose to do it. And I'm not here to say this is the only way and that is the only way. Um, there's a common practice in the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous to use a workbook, right? There's like that workbook way. And while it's good and it looks to be thorough and it's asking a ton of questions, for me, the problem when I did the workbook was that I found that those questions seemed to drum up troublesome and unimportant why questions. For me, it kept me looking at the why over and over and over again. And it took way too long. And I didn't find, for me, that it was helpful. Um, you know, and what happens what is that people take a question like this one on page, 51. Did I have such unprincipled ambition that I double crossed and undercut my associates? And we turn it into this one. Why did I become ambitious? Okay, that is not that is not what we're looking at. Why did you become ambitious? Doesn't really matter why you became ambitious. I can give you a million reasons why I became the way I became. And mostly I'd be looking at my parents, right? Totally unfair, not their inventory and not helpful. Unless I'm going to get in a time machine and undo any imperfections that anybody ever did, it's a waste of my time. So what happens to me is that caused me to be like that, And again, this is not how we take our inventory. Page 52 says this, but all alcoholics who have drunk themselves out of jobs, family, and friends will need to cross examine themselves ruthlessly to determine how their personality defects have thus demolished their security. So the one we're cross examining is ourselves. We look closely and critically at ourselves. And this becomes a practice of a lifetime that I am critical and I look closely at myself every day. Every day I have to look at it, not with a hammer, not to beat myself up, but for an opportunity to have true humility, an honest admission of who I am, and a sincere desire to be better. I must look at myself critically. And so if my disturbance was seemingly caused by the behavior of others, why do I lack the ability to accept conditions I cannot change? And again, we cannot base our happiness on the actions of others. And further down it says, if I am unable to change the present state of affairs, am I willing to take the measures necessary to shape my life to the conditions as they are? And what does this mean? Well, for me, it means that my inventory will help me ultimately find a way to live happily and peacefully, even though life is not going according to my design. The inventory helps me grow to accept and trust God's design. Oftentimes, as we are inventorying our lives, we come face to face with injustices. And when we look at our resentments, we are certain that we're right and they are wrong. And to this, I usually say, great, you're right. Okay, you win, right? Next, now what? Now what are we going to do? And so now we have to find a way to live happily, peacefully, and productively in light of this. And, so page 53 says this, my problem has been we have not once sought to be one in a family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Now we're finding out, how are we going to live with unfairnesses? We're going to be a friend among friends. We're going to be a worker among workers. We're going to be useful. Always we try to struggle to the top of the heap or to hide underneath. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership, relationship with any one of those about us. A true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. So if that's my problem, then my solution would be to be one in a family, a friend among friends, a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society, one of many, happily in the herd, able to have healthy partnership relations. And while an inventory does not make these things automatically come to fruition, the inventory is where we first come face to face with the defects that have prevented this from happening. And the rest of the steps will then help this come to pass, right? And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Melissa.